Hi, Brendan O'Connell, once again, founder and member of Domestic Democracy United. Last evening, I participated in a night-long vigil for the victims of the Aurora, Colorado shootings, and I did much prayer. The book of reference which I used to do the prayer, to call upon God for healing of those who are injured, for support for the families of loved ones, was the Book of Prayer, the Methodist Book of Prayer. And I found that it worked great for really conveying to God what I was trying to get across, but oftentimes it can be difficult in our sort of limited new way of speaking that we sort of have these days. So I'm back from the vigil. All night long I burned candles and really just did whatever I could to just get this whole thing behind me, just to you know, go beyond the sensationalism and everything else, and to really just pray as hard as I could to God for not only my own repentance, which is always important, but also to the victims of the Aurora, Colorado shooting. Well, this may not be the most opportune subject for what I'm about to say, but I'm now retiring my blog, Politalk. Domestic Democracy United will go on as a political action committee, but my blog, on which this is airing, Politalk, will now be retired. So for any of you who are fans on the inside or the outside of our country, of our state, where I'm from, Pittsburgh, North Carolina, it's over. The dream is over, as someone once said. But I'm not at all postmodernly depressed about it. I just think that I've said my piece. I started with a basic premise, and I ended with the basic premise, and I think at the beginning I had a lot more rage, and at the end I had a lot more solemnity, mostly due to my convictions and their absolute objective truth. So what I'd merely like to say is this is the addendum to the Domestic Democracy United manifesto, and that is Domestic Democracy United has roughly 7 to 8 or 9 members officially who signed on to the document agreeing to the official tenets of Domestic Democracy United, or as I call it, DDU. And when they signed on, they were gracious enough to happily agree to the terms which I had put down. As a matter of fact, I even had one non-signer mention to me about how she really thought that that's what America was all about, and the fact that many of the members of Domestic Democracy United, other than myself, are native North Carolinians, really has meant a lot to me. And while I haven't kept in touch with them, I can only hope that they've gone on in their own lives to really praise Christ in the proper way, and maybe learn from the manifesto how to also do good things in civil, social, and political functions. Anyhow, this is just an addendum to my manifesto, which goes thusly. You see, the hymn 102 is called "Now Thank We All Our God," and I believe that if we do not thank our God, that our God will condemn us. If we're not thankful for the blessings that God gives us, He will condemn us. And so it's important for our hope, any hope, is from God, and it can come from nowhere else. Yet today we live in a society that really says to us, God, maybe not so important, that your hope, your sovereignty, your freedom, it really comes from us, the elites, the educated. We know what's best, and God may or may not be a figment of your imagination. As I discovered recently, Freud considered religion to be a form of neurosis, i.e., a bad, unhealthy thing. And so I think that we can all sort of distance ourselves from this sort of scientific hierarchy, which very often closes itself off altogether to anything but the tried, true, and tested fields of physics, neuroscience, and physicianship, and very often times doesn't allow any room for any speculation that the theory of evolution is potentially evil, that the theory of evolution is even inadequate, and people will literally be expelled. So if you are interested in learning more about some of my viewpoints, a great deal of what I've gotten on some of the more radical topics was from a Netflix movie called Expelled, and it's right there on Netflix. Just type in Expelled, and it gives you the rough and tumble of the real sort of Machiavellian viciousness of academia. But what I'd like to say is that you and I, we are free. There are ways in which one could argue that we're not free, not truly free, perhaps as the founders meant. But you and I, the born-again Christians, the patriots, the lovers of the Constitution, the lovers of capitalism, we really are truly free. And I'll tell you why. It's because God granted to us the single lone virtue of joy. And when you have joy, you're free. But I often wondered, what about the overly zealous, cheerful person that often gets caricatured by people in the continent? And what about the just overzealous cheerfulness that maybe isn't really joy? What I want to say is, too, that is very much a part of what it means to have joy in your heart, and always looking towards doing what is best for the Lord and praising His name comes first and foremost. When I talk about Domestic Democracy United Super PAC, very often I make reference to somewhat esoteric hermeneutics or political almost haberdashery at times. And I'm guilty of a lot of malfeasances throughout the body of work that is politalk. However, I'm 100% certain that should any of my statements written not be literally true at the time of the writing, that they will be and become salient on into the future. And so I leave politalk as an historical record. I leave it there as the record, perhaps, of someone who is not fit to write the very words which I wrote. I leave them as a record of someone who dropped out of high school and was self-taught and self-learned. But I leave them there nonetheless, because I've always felt that in a true democracy, everyone's life should be able to be an open book. And it is only in totalitarian, fascist, statist governments where we really ultimately feel the need to hide. And I've told myself I refuse to hide. And so my body of work in politalk, I would greatly appreciate it if you would scan some of the middle sections, which are very oft overlooked. And thank you so much for being a part of politalk and coming to it day after day. If I end up creating another blog on a similar vein, I will be sure to reference it to politalk. But Domestic Democracy United stands for one thing alone, and that is free market democracy. And anytime you hear anybody deriding free market style democracy, you really ought to take a second look at yourself, at the person saying this, and think to yourself, is this really the kind of ideology I want to engage in? Is this really the kind of life I want to live? Is this ideology that's being proposed in such and such cliché really what gives life meaning? And I'm going to say no. Thank you so much. Brendan O'Connell, founder and member of Domestic Democracy United. God bless, and thanks to all the fans.